The year was 1941. The place, a mission hospital in the province of Xi'an, far away in northwest China. Lost, mountainous, 1,000 miles from anywhere. And the most astonished man in the whole of China at that particular moment was the British doctor in charge of the hospital, who thought he was dealing with a sick Chinese woman. Nurse! Nurse! Where are you? Come and listen to this. Now, hurry! Yes, doctor. What is matter? She dead. Dead? No. Not yet. But she's supposed to be Chinese, isn't she? Wait. Listen. She's been raving like this since those peasants found her in a field, brought her here to die. We were certain that she was Chinese. But listen. Do you hear that? It's unbelievable. That's not Chinese song. Of course not. It's from an English musical comedy. I remember it well. She must be Chinese woman. Speak mountain dialect, very difficult unless born in mountain. She wear Chinese clothes. She look Chinese. You must say, my children. The Japanese will kill them. But that's English, isn't it? Save my children. But what does she mean, save her children? What children? And what's she doing here in the middle of China, in the middle of a war? Brought here by 2 Chinese peasants on a cart. And dying. She going to die, doctor? Well, looks very much like it. Malnutrition, scars, relapsing fever. Unless, that is. Yes, doctor? Unless God has decided he has other plans for her. And obviously God did have other plans for Gladys Aylward, because that was the name of the strange young woman who had arrived at the doors of their mission hospital. Or perhaps from the very beginning Gladys herself decided that God had better have other plans for her, for she always believed strongly that God helps those who help themselves. Gladys Aylward couldn't remember when she first decided that she must become a missionary. But the idea grew until it became an obsession. And then the obsession became a firm conviction that she must become a missionary in China. She'd been born in Edmonton, North London, Cheddington Road, a row of red brick houses, lace curtains, a happy childhood. Her father had been a postman. She'd gone into service as a parlour maid. But she always attended church regularly, went to Bible classes. And one day, absolute bliss, she was accepted as a probationary student at the China Inland Mission, surely the first step to become a missionary there. She was then 26 years old, very small and slender, a neat figure, an oval face, dark hair parted in the middle. But 3 months after she started her course, her dark brown eyes took on a worried look when the principal, a tall, thin, scholarly man, asked her to come to his office. "You've been with us now for 3 months, Miss Aylward." "Yes, sir." "Now, theology." "I wasn't very good at theology, was I, sir?" "No, you weren't. Not good at all." She remembered how she sat with her fingers tightly clenched in her lap. She hardly heard the voice that repeated her list of failures. She knew she could never make him understand. She knew she lacked the logic to argue with him or the education to pass his examinations. She knew she hadn't the background. She knew she had no chance. It was to Gladys the most heartbreaking moment of her life. Nothing else to do but to go back to being a parlour maid again. But she knew also, with a single-minded clearness, that she still must go to China. An agency found her a job in a London household. She sat on her servant bed and looked at the suitcase she had lugged up the stairs. She took out the black well-thumbed Bible and put it on the dressing table. She turned out her purse, which contained all the money she possessed. There were 2 pennies and 1 halfpenny. She placed the coins on top of the Bible. She felt like weeping. China seemed so far away. Suddenly conscious of her deep needs, she cried out, "Oh God, here is my Bible. Here's my money. Here's me. Use me, God." And it was at that moment that she knew what her course must be. If the China Inland Mission wouldn't send her to China, then she would send herself. She would save her wages and pay her own fare. She never forgot the look on the face of the elderly booking clerk at Müller's, the travel agency in the Haymarket, when she approached him about a ticket to China. Certainly he thought she was mad. "Madam," he said severely, "the journey by Trans-Siberian Railway is quite impossible because a conflict is raging between Russia and China at the eastern end." "I couldn't really care about a silly old war," said Gladys. "It's the cheapest way, isn't it? That's what I want. Now, if you'll book me a passage, you can have these £3 on account. If you'll order me a ticket, I'll bring in my money every week until I've paid the balance. Is that all right?" Very well, madam," the clerk said. "I don't know what the management would think about this, but I hope it will be all right." Exactly what she thought she would be able to do when she arrived in China without a penny in her pocket, understanding not one word of the language, she hardly knew herself. But she was determined that she could at least equip herself as an evangelist and know the Bible intimately. Then she had her first piece of luck. From a friend she heard of Mrs. Lawson. Oh, a dear old soul, 73 years old this year, and still working away as a missionary in China. She wrote only a few days ago saying she wished she could find some younger woman who could carry on with her work. Gladys Aylward remembered how her mouth dropped open in astonishment. How all she could do was whisper weakly, "That's me. That's me." She wrote at once. Could Mrs. Lawson help her? Could she join her? Could she come to China? Then came that wonderful morning when the letter bearing the Chinese stamps dropped on the hall floor. It told her that if she could manage to get to Qinxin by herself, a messenger would meet her there and guide her to wherever Mrs. Lawson was working. The excitement! She had to get a passport at once. She had to finish paying for the ticket. She had to plan what she was going to take. "I'm going to China," she said. "I'm going to China." The Gladys Aylward one-woman expedition to China assembled on the platform of Liverpool Street Station one Saturday morning in October 1930. It must be numbered among the most humble expeditions ever to leave the shores of England. It possessed in currency exactly 9 pence in coin and 1 traveller's cheque worth £2. The cheque was sewn carefully into an old corset given to the expedition by its mother, in the hopeful belief that even horrible foreigners would not dare to pry too closely into an undergarment. It also hid, besides the cheque, her Bible, her fountain pen, her tickets, and her passport. She kissed her mother and father and sister goodbye and settled herself into the corner seat of her third-class compartment. The whistle blew, the train hissed and puffed. She waved through the window until her family were out of sight. She dried her eyes, sat down and spread out on the seat beside her the old fur coat which a friend had given her and which her mother had cut up and made into a rug. Her 2 suitcases were on the rack. One contained her clothes, the other an odd assortment of tins of corned beef, fish and baked beans, biscuits, soda cakes, meat cubes, coffee essence, tea, and hard-boiled eggs. She also had a saucepan, a kettle, and a spirit stove. Gladys Aylward was off to China to become a missionary. These were her rations to avoid starvation. Across Europe, the train chugged on day after day, across Germany and Poland to Moscow, and then out across endless plains and forests, across Siberia, skirting Manchuria, and avoiding the battle zone before reaching Vladivostok. Then by boat, Gladys traveled via Japan to her first port in China, Chinsin. There she found a mission with a European staff where they trained Chinese converts. Yes, they knew about Mrs. Lawson. She was in the territory of Shanxi in North China at a mission station in an old walled town called Yangcheng. It was north of the Yellow River, in very wild and mountainous territory. It would take many weeks to reach there, the last 100 miles or so by mule across mountain trails. Well, she never forgot that first sight of Yangcheng. It stood far off on its mountain peak like a castle in the fairy story. Gladys found where Mrs. Lawson lived, an old inn with a derelict courtyard. Out of the door to meet them came a small lady with pure white hair and the bluest eyes Gladys had ever seen. She was dressed in a dark blue robe and trousers. "Well, and who are you?" "I'm Gladys Aylward. You're Mrs. Lawson?" "Yes, I am. Well, get off that mule and come on in." The house was old and big with many rooms. "I've only just managed to rent it," said Mrs. Lawson. "Got it cheap because it's haunted. A bit rough, but it'll be all right when it's cleaned up. Are you hungry?" "Famished." Mrs. Lawson called out in Chinese, and an old man came in. He was introduced as Yang, the cook. After the meal, Gladys went out to get her baggage and to look at the view. As she turned out through the doorway, a group of Chinese infants saw her and fled, howling. Some older children appeared over a wall, surrounded her, and began to jeer in a sing-song voices. 2 women further down the street picked up pieces of dried mud and flung them in her direction. In consternation, Gladys ran back to Mrs. Lawson and told her what had happened. "It happens to me every time I go out," said Mrs. Lawson. "I usually come back covered from head to foot with the filth and mud they've thrown at me. They hate us here. They call us foreign devils. It's something you'll have to get used to." If there was ever a militant Christian abroad in the mountains of Shanxi, it was Jeannie Lawson. But poor Gladys in those early weeks found life hard to bear. Life was full of dramatic and sometimes dreadful surprises. On one occasion, Jeannie Lawson was sitting at the table writing in her journal when Gladys burst in, almost incoherent with grief and shock. "Well, whatever's the matter?" said Jenny. Oh, I've just seen a dreadful thing. They've killed a man in the market square with a sword." "Well?" "But they cut off his head with a sword." "It's the law for certain crimes. He was probably a bandit or a thief or a murderer. He must have been tried before the Mandarin. If they're found guilty, they chop off their heads straight away.
Oh, but it's horrible.
Did you expect things to be the same in China as in England?
No, but...
Listen to me, Gladys Aylward. You haven't come here to China to alter their laws. They'll throw the body down the mountainside where it'll be eaten by wolves and vultures. There'll be no Christian burial, understand that. And they'll stand the head up on the city wall so that everyone can see it.
Oh, it's awful. So barbaric.
Yes, it's barbaric. Sometimes they won't have an execution for months. Then suddenly there's a batch and the whole wall's lined with heads. You may as well get used to it. There are lots of things in China you'll have to get used to. We'll try and change these things through the love and wisdom of Jesus Christ, by making them understand truth and justice. But we won't do it by running home crying our eyes out. There were many other hard lessons Gladys had to learn. But actually it was Gladys herself who gave Jeanie the great idea. At the time they were walking back up the slope which led to the west gate. The mule track passed in through the east gate and out through the west. At nightfall all gates were locked, and mule trains arriving after that hour were refused admittance to the city. The early mule trains were already coming through the gates. As they passed by, Gladys said, "If we only could talk to these men, they'd carry the Christian message for hundreds of miles through the province, wouldn't they?" Jeanie Lawson walked on without a word for several paces. Then suddenly she turned to Gladys. "You've put your finger right on it," she said. "That's it. We'll open an inn." "Open an inn?" "Of course. Now, why didn't I think of it before? Our house was built as an inn in the first place hundreds of years ago. We've plenty of rooms. We've got a cook. It's quite easy to feed them."
"But we didn't come here to be innkeepers."
Don't you see what I'm after? Once we've got them inside, we can tell them stories of the Gospels, the Chinese love stories. All the inns offer roughly the same service, a bed and food. We can charge the same price. But as an added attraction, we shall tell them stories. It's a wonderful idea. At first doubtful, Gladys was carried along on the flood tide of Jeanie's enthusiasm. The roof was mended, the large courtyard cleaned out, new doors were fixed to the rooms, large quantities of millet and maize and vegetables were stored. "A name," said Jeanie. "We must have a signboard outside the house giving the name of the inn. They all do."
"I suppose we could call it the Red Lion or the White Hart," said Gladys. "Though I think my mother would be a bit shocked if she thought I'd come all the way to China to work as a barmaid in the Red Lion."
"It must be a happy name," said Jeanie. "Let's have a title with happiness in it. How many happinesses are there?"
I don't know. Dozens, I should think. Love, tolerance, truth, beauty, devotion. How many is that?
5. And the Chinese have a saying that the 6th happiness is the one you find inside yourself.
"I've got it," she said. "A wonderful name. The Inn of the 6th Happiness."
A few days later the inn was officially opened, and now they had to find their customers. Yang was dispatched up to the city gate to find a few muleteers and bring them to the inn. 10 minutes later he returned, bringing only one frightened Chinese. Yang had explained that the foreign devil ladies offered clean accommodations, good food, and, as an extra attraction, stories, which were to be told free of charge. Where else in the province of Shanxi could he expect such a bargain? What did he fear? Was not he, Yang, an old and respected Chinese, living with the foreign devils? He hadn't been bewitched. Reassured, the muleteer fetched his comrades. Yang brought in the steaming pot of food and ladled it into their basins. They ate hungrily and agreed that it was good food. But when Jeanie Lawson and Gladys entered, the muleteers looked anxious. "Don't be afraid," said Jeanie cheerfully. I'm going to tell you a story which you'll enjoy. It's about a man called Jesus Christ. He lived long ago in a faraway country called Palestine, and it was a hard life, just as yours is, with not much food and endless hard work. The inn was open. The storytelling had begun. Learning the Chinese language was also, Gladys discovered, a slow business. But Yang was a willing teacher. He had volunteered to become cook to Jeannie Lawson in the first place because he'd heard of this Christian gospel and he wished to know more about it. She learned some of the Bible stories in Chinese by heart and relieved Mrs. Lawson from time to time at the evening storytelling. Even Yang took a turn, although at first he was inclined to get his religious relationships confused. He loved the story of Noah's Ark, and on 2 occasions they discovered him describing enthusiastically how Jesus Christ put all his animals aboard the ark and sailed to safety across the flood waters to Bethlehem. For more than a year, Jeannie and Gladys ran their inn, and then, to Gladys's great sorrow, Jeannie, now well over 70, died. The weeks following Jeannie Lawson's death were amongst the most difficult that Gladys ever experienced in China. Her financial position was perilous. Their rent was paid for a year. The little money they earned every night from the muleteers just about covered their overheads, but there was no margin of profit or hardly a livelihood. Still, the mission was in being, and Gladys had no intention of abandoning the inn, ever, if she could carry on. It was several weeks after Jeannie's death that Yang came up with the idea of Gladys visiting the Mandarin of Yangcheng and pay her respects. But I've never met a Mandarin in my life. I don't know what to say to him. How many times do you bow? Who speaks first? But you go and find out these things, and I'll consider it. Yang did find out. A woman had no status in Yangcheng. A foreign devil missionary had even less. The Mandarin of Yangcheng was a powerful figure. As magistrate, he commanded the power of freedom and imprisonment, life and death over all the people in his territory. In a feudal society, he was an absolute lord. It was therefore with a great shudder of panic that one day she heard Yang shouting, "Mandarin coming! Mandarin coming!" She ran down the stairs and into the courtyard just as the retinue began to troop in. It was so magnificent that she halted in mid-stride. Coolies bore the sedan chair, curtained against prying eyes. Around it were grouped the Mandarin's clerks in robes of dark blue. The clerk stepped forward and carefully opened the door of the chair, his arm proffered to help the Mandarin out. He was quite magnificent. He was tall, with black hair, a pale ivory face, and a moustache which drooped at the corners. His wide-sleeved gown fell smoothly to the pointed black shoes. His long, glossy, jet-black pigtail hung down his back. "I come to ask your advice," he said at last. "Oh!" She was surprised to hear she had a voice at all. "You are aware that for many generations the custom of foot binding has been practiced in this province," he went on. Has it? She hadn't really thought much about it. His Mandarin Chinese was pure. She felt pleased with herself that she had no difficulties in understanding him. "The feet of females are bound soon after they are born. Now we have received a decree from the central government that all foot binding must cease immediately. Every woman in this province has bound feet,
Therefore, someone with big feet, unbound feet, must undertake the work of inspection. Obviously, no man can do this work. It must be a woman. You have friends in the outside provinces who would know of such a woman with big feet. Will you write to them and ask them if they could send such a woman for this purpose?
I will do that with pleasure. A momentary flutter of panic gripped her as she realized she didn't know anyone in all China with or without big feet.
It is not a well-paid position. The wages will be 1 measure of millet a day and a small sum to buy vegetables. A mule will be supplied to make the journey out of the lonely villages, and a guard of 2 soldiers will accompany this female. You will find such a woman for me. She is most necessary.
I will do my best, repeated Gladys. She bowed again. Everyone bowed to everyone else. It was all very polite. The Mandarin got back into his sedan chair, and the deputation moved out of the courtyard. In an effort to obtain a female foot inspector, Gladys wrote letters all over China. The replies were identical. Firstly, any suitable girl with big feet could not speak the Shanxi dialect. Secondly, she could not or did not wish to ride a mule. Thirdly, she did not wish or was not able to exist on a diet of millet. They came from places where they only ate rice. The girls, it seemed, were not prepared to face a diet of millet for all the mandarins in Shanxi. Approximately 2 months later, complete with his followers, the Mandarin swept once again into the courtyard of the Inn of the Six Happiness. His face was angry. "You have not found a woman." "I'm still trying." With contemptuous flick of his fan, the Mandarin silenced her. "Then it must be you who becomes foot inspector," he announced. "Me? Me?" "You have big, unbound feet. You live here. You will do it." As he talked, Gladys had a marvelous idea. A mule taking her out to the most distant villages. A guard to protect her. It was an opportunity for her to visit every part of the province, preaching wherever she went. But would he allow this? "You must realize, Excellency," she said, "that if I accept this position, I shall try to convert the people of this province to Christianity wherever I go." There was a short silence. Maybe she had been impertinent. Then he said quietly, "I care nothing for your religion or to whom you preach. This is a matter for the conscience of each individual. But it is most important that you should become my official foot inspector." She bowed low. "I'm anxious to be of assistance," she said. "I will gladly accept the position." She never forgot the first village at which she arrived as official foot inspector. She did not quite know what to do. She walked across the square towards the first small house she saw. The crowd gathered behind her. She went in through the open door. The house was clean and neat. A small, dark-eyed girl, aged about 3, clung to her mother's trousers and looked nervously up at Gladys. A single glance was sufficient to tell that her feet were bound. "That one," said Gladys loudly. "Unbind her feet." Frightened, the mother hesitated. "Come on now. Hurry up. If God intended little girls to have horribly stumpy little feet, he'd made them like that in the first place, wouldn't he?" The mother took the child on her lap and began to undo the bandages, revealing tiny white feet with toes bent downwards and up into the soles. "Look at those feet! Disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful!" She knelt down and gently prised the toes up and away from the sole. The child regarded her with wide, timid eyes. "There, 5 little piggies all ready to go to market." She massaged the foot tenderly. Suddenly there was a little giggle from the child. She wriggled with delight. The spell was broken. One of the neighbors rushed off to the next house to explain what had to be done, and the news went round the village before Gladys had finished her first treatment. As she proceeded, she soon found housewives exhibiting all their little girls with unbound feet. The soldiers' repeated order, "Unbind feet or go to prison," played a large part in this social reform, but it worked. As the Mandarin's official foot inspector, Gladys had made good. These for Gladys were the years of endless content, with the Inn of the Six Happiness as a base, and a small Christian community growing up around it. Her wanderings through the mountains were always adventures. The weeks passed into months, and the months into years, and there was a harvest of happiness to be gathered from each day. There were, of course, occasional crises. That day, for example, when a message from the prison governor announced that a riot had broken out in the prison. "You must come at once," said the messenger urgently. "It is most important." Gladys stared at him. "But what's the riot in the prison got to do with me? It can't have anything to do with my foot inspection. You must come at once. It is an official order." He hopped from one foot to the other in impatience. "All right," said Gladys, "I'll come." The outside wall of the prison flanked the main street. From the other side came a terrible noise. Screams, shouts, and yells. The governor of the prison, small, pale-faced, his mouth set into a worried line, met her at the entrance. Behind were grouped 6 of his staff. "The convicts are killing each other," he said. "So I can hear. But what am I here for? I'm only the missionary woman, the foot inspector." "You must go in and stop the fighting." "I must go in? Me? Me go in there? Are you mad? If I went in there, they'd kill me." "But how can they kill you? You tell everybody that you have come here because you have the living God inside you." The living God? Living God? You preach it everywhere, in the streets and villages. He promises you eternal life. You say that. If you preach the truth, if your God protects you from harm, then you can stop this riot. Gladys stared at him and began to think. It's true. You have been preaching that your Christian God protects you from harm and from all things evil. Fail now, and you are finished in Yangcheng. Discard your faith now, and you discard it forever. I must try, she said to herself. I must try. Oh, God, give me strength. She turned to the governor. All right. Open the door. I'll go into them. The key, snapped the governor. The key, quickly. The immense door swung open. She heard the key turn behind her. She was locked in the prison with a horde of raving criminals who by their din sounded as if they all had gone completely insane. The dark tunnel, 20 yards long, stretched before her. At the far end it appeared to open into a courtyard. With faltering steps, she walked through it and came to a standstill, rooted in horror. The courtyard was about 60 feet square, with cage-like structures round all 4 sides. A group of men were watching one convict who brandished a large blood-stained chopper. As she stared, he suddenly rushed at them, and they scattered wildly to every part of the square. No one took any notice whatsoever of Gladys. The man rushed again. The group parted. He singled one man out and chased him. The man ran towards Gladys, then ducked away. The madman with the axe halted only a few feet from her. Hardly realizing what she was doing, she took 2 angry steps towards him. "Give me that chopper. Give it to me at once." The man turned to look at her. For 3 long seconds, the wild, dark pupils, staring from bloodshot eyes, glared at her. He took 2 paces forward. "Give me that chopper. Give me that chopper." Suddenly, meekly, he held out the axe. Gladys took the weapon from his hand and held it rigidly down her side. The other convicts stared from every corner of the courtyard. "All of you, come over here. Come on, form into a line. Get into a line at once. You over there, come on. Form up in front of me." Obediently, the convicts shambled across, forming into a ragged group before her. There was silence. Then, suddenly her fear had gone. In its place was an immense pity. "You should be ashamed of yourselves. All this noise and all this mess." Mess? She waved her arms to indicate the bodies and blood left behind. "The governor sent me in here to find out what it was all about. Now, if you clean up this courtyard and promise to behave in the future, I'll ask him to deal leniently with you this time. Now, what is your grievance? Why did you start fighting like this?" A tall young man spoke up. "My name is Feng," he said. He explained that no one really knew why or how the riot had started. Someone had quarreled, someone else had joined in, and suddenly, without anyone knowing exactly why, violence erupted. He could not explain this strange occurrence. Perhaps it was that many of the men had been there for many years, he said. "What do you do all day in here?" "Do? There's nothing to do." "No occupation of any sort?" "None. But a man must have work, something to do. Well, I should see the governor about it." It was at that moment she became conscious that the governor and his followers were behind her. The governor bowed to Gladys. "You've done well," he said gratefully. "We must thank you." "It's disgraceful. These men are locked up here week after week, year after year, with nothing to do. Of course you have riots if they've nothing to occupy their time. You must find them occupations." "Occupations," he repeated. "Yes, they must have work to do. We must get looms so they can weave cloth. We must find all sorts of jobs so that they can earn a little money and buy food and get back a little self-respect." The governor nodded, anxious to cooperate. "We will help all we can." "That is good." Gladys turned to Feng. "I'm going now, but I shall come back. I promise I will do all I can to help you." "Thank you," he said. "Thank you, Ai Weiwei." She did not know at the time what the words Ai Weiwei meant. It was Yang who told her. It means the virtuous one. She was known as Ai Weiwei for all her remaining years in China. It was during these years that Gladys began to collect her small family of orphans. The first, a baby girl she bought from a beggar woman for the sum of 9p, and Gladys called her Ninepence ever after. The second, a little boy, just walked in the front door and never left. And the other 3 arrived in roughly the same way. Now Gladys and her family of 5 lived at the inn. They were good days. There was time to think, time to sleep, time to pray. She was very happy. She knew that rumors of war with Japan were in the air, but thought that Yangcheng was far too remote for war ever to reach them. She was wrong. It was on a spring morning in 1938 that the little silver planes came buzzing in over the mountains. Everyone ran out of their houses to watch them, for many had never seen an aeroplane before, and these looked so pretty, swooping down out of the sun. Gladys did not run out of the inn, because at the time, with the cook and 4 converts, she was kneeling in morning prayer in an upstairs room. She did not hear the planes until the last minute. The people in the streets of Yangcheng were still waving and shouting as the pointed metal cylinders fell from the bellies of the aircraft and plummeted down into the town. One bomb screamed over the buttress of the city wall. Another struck the roof of the inn. In the upstairs room where Gladys, Yang, and the others were praying, the floor collapsed, and they slid and fell downwards in a welter of timber, tiles, dust, and plaster to be buried amongst this debris in the room below. Gladys did not remember losing consciousness. She only remembered hearing faint voices, and then slowly realizing that she was lying face downwards with a great weight pressing on her back. It seemed hours before she felt the debris being hauled away. At last they got to her. A heavy beam pinned her down. It was a miracle she had not been killed. The aeroplanes had gone, but now there was panic and confusion everywhere. "In the town it is dreadful," one man was crying. "We must go and see how we can help them," said Gladys. "Now stop that moaning and come and lend me a hand." Dead and dying, wounded and bomb-shot lay everywhere, for the streets had been crowded. No one seemed able to take charge. So Gladys did. "I need all of you," she snapped angrily. The surprised townsmen stared at her, then obediently followed her instructions. "Now get to work. Start clearing this rubble. Get the wounded under cover. Fetch sheets to make bandages. We need hot water. Hurry, now hurry." She was still working with the wounded amongst the debris when the Mandarin found her. On the spot, they set up a relief committee. They organized burying the dead, helping the wounded, collecting and distributing food, and clearing the streets. The Mandarin had other disturbing news. "Reports are that the Japanese are advancing on Seychal," he said. "From Seychal they will almost certainly march towards Yangcheng. I understand that they are not a merciful people." "Well, we've several days before they arrive," said Gladys. "We ought not to waste any more time. When they come, all our people can take refuge in the mountain villages." The people of Yangcheng gathered up their possessions. The Japanese entered a deserted city. Gladys, with her small Christian community, left for a tiny village which lay several miles away to the south. There they lived until the Japanese left Yangcheng and it was safe to go back. Through the autumn, winter, and early spring of 1939, Gladys divided her time between the mountain village Yangcheng and all the villages in the province where she had established small Christian communities. It was a dangerous and troubled time, and in that spring of 1939, the news that the Japanese were moving back through the mountains again sent a wind of panic blowing through Yangcheng. The orders of the Chinese Nationalist Army were harsh. Take to the hills, live in the caves and mountains, grow your crops in every fold and valley where you find fertile earth. Prey on the invader like locusts. Kill his men. Steal his supplies. Take the rifles from his dead and turn them against the Japanese. Only in this way can we save China." It was against this background of fear and desolation that the Mandarin called Gladys to see him. "I am having a small meeting, a supper, you might say, which I would like you to attend. It will probably be the last ever held in the town of Yangcheng, and I have something to say that I wish you to hear." The meal was simple, unlike the feasts she had attended in early years. At its close, the Mandarin stood up and made his speech. He recalled how Gladys had first come to Yangcheng, how she had worked as a foot inspector, what she had done for the poor and the sick and the imprisoned. He talked of the new faith called Christianity, which she had brought with her, and which he had discussed with her many times. After speaking for some minutes, he turned very gravely towards her. "I would also like to embrace your faith. I would like to become a Christian." It was one of the most moving moments of her life. And in the same period came another event which was to change her life. There was heavy fighting going on all around Yangcheng when a young Chinese nationalist officer called at the inn. "We are sorry to bother you," he said, "but we thought you might help us." "How can I help you? You are fighting a war. This land belongs to God," he said quietly. "We are sorry to interfere, but when I was stationed in Chongqing, General Chiang Kai-shek said, 'If you want someone you can trust, go to the Christian church.'" Gladys looked at him sharply. "What are you to do with the general?" "I am one of his representatives. He believed that you, a Christian, would be on the side of China, that you would care deeply for China and its people." "Of course, that's true. Perhaps you had better come in and talk to me." Seated opposite her in the mission, he told her that they were members of Chiang Kai-shek's intelligence service. In Shanxi, the position was confused, and they had been sent to find out what was happening. It was an area vital to the defense of China. If they could blunt the Japanese attack anywhere, it would be here, in the mountains, where lines of communications were easy to cut, and where at the foot of the peaks flowed the mighty barrier of the Yellow River. He added at the end, quite simply, "Will you help us?" Gladys drew in her breath. She had not expected such a plain question. He was a soldier. She was a missionary. "Japanese intentions in China are evil, are they not?" he continued. "China is fighting to the death in an effort to prevent this evil spreading. China must win this war." She had never thought very seriously or precisely about the ethics of the war. It was odd that this soft-voiced young man should force her to confront the real issues. She didn't know what to do, so she compromised. She said, "I'll help you as far as my conscience will allow me." He stood up and bowed. "That is most kind of you. I will call again and talk with you further, if I may." His voice was very gentle. When he had gone, she went across to the cracked mirror in the corner of her room and stared at herself. Somehow, for the first time for many years, this young man had made her think of herself as a woman again. How strange. She found herself looking forward to his next visit with an odd stirring of interest. He came one evening before she was setting off for a village deep in the mountains, a very lonely and difficult trek. She told him about it, wondering why he seemed perturbed as she described her route. "Aren't there bandits in those mountains?" he asked. "Yes, yes, lots of bandits." "And you mean to travel alone?"
But I usually travel alone. The bandits are my friends, my parishioners.
It must be very dangerous, and the passes are steep. If you fell and broke a leg or injured yourself, you could lie there for days and no one would ever find you. Gladys looked at him with puzzled eyes. In all the years she'd been in China, no one had ever shown the slightest concern for her personal safety. Now this charming, good-looking young man seemed seriously worried. It was very unusual. She decided she liked it. Well, I shall be all right. I'm capable of looking after myself. Please take care, he said. Please take care. She was a week away in the mountain country, and when she got back, Linan, for now she knew his name, was waiting for her. His relief was quite plain. His visits became more and more regular. They became good friends. They were the same age. Both had eager, inquisitive minds. He talked to her about China. He told her of its traditions and culture, of its beauty and its spirit. He opened for her a new window on a country she thought she knew intimately already, and yet, after he talked, she realized she hardly knew it at all. Each time they met in the weeks that followed, the immense gulf between their separate worlds grew narrower. If she was falling in love, she reasoned, then it was God who allowed it to happen. In 2 of the villages Gladys visited, she had found Japanese troops billeted. She had paid small attention to their presence and gone about her business, ignoring them, and they had ignored her. She told Linan about it when she returned. He was very interested and questioned her closely about the number of troops, what weapons they had, where they were situated. The next time she went into territory occupied by the Japanese, she made more careful note of their numbers and their armaments, knowing that her reports would please him. He stirred in her a new patriotism for her adopted country, and now, after all these months, she was almost as fervent a patriot as he. And now also she had to face the hard facts of what she was doing. If she could bring back information of military value, pass through the Japanese lines unhindered and unwatched, and so help to defeat the common enemy, then she would do these things. She had become a spy for the nationalist Chinese. The Chinese clung grimly to the territory around Yangcheng and the larger city of Seichao through the autumn, winter, and into the early spring of 1940. It was during this period that Gladys became friendly with the Chinese general based in the city. Introduced by Linan, she was made welcome at his house. Few love affairs can have flourished in circumstances stranger than that of Gladys and Linan. They met at odd moments in the mountains, in shattered villages, in the bombed towns. They discussed marriage. He was eager that they should marry at once, live together as man and wife, as best they could, war or no war. It was Gladys who said no. The war had to be won first. Marriage, their personal happiness, must wait. With the coming of spring, every day brought the Japanese closer to the town. The noise of rifle and artillery fire was continuous. In spite of all this, she was determined not to leave the city. She felt she might protect her people from some of the worst excesses of the Japanese troops. She was worried about the children, however. From the beginning, the Seichao mission had always cared for orphans. She had known for some time that far away to the south, Madame Chiang Kai-shek had started a fund for war orphans. Orphans were collected from war-ravaged areas and sent to the ancient capital of Xi'an in Shenxi, and there fed, clothed, and protected. During the winter, Gladys had written to the authorities in Chongqing asking if they could help her. A month later, she got a reply. If the children could be brought to Xi'an, the committee would gladly look after them. Gladys decided that all the children must be moved to safety. Someone had to take them south. Now, as the first move, she arranged they should go back to Yangcheng and the Inn of the Six Happiness under the care of 2 women mission workers. Gladys lined them up in a long procession and saw them out of the mission gate. A long crocodile of singing, squalling children headed across the plain towards Yangcheng. When they had gone, she lay on her bed, fully dressed as usual, and weary from the long hours of organization and nursing, she dozed off. When the gravel rattled against her window pane, she awoke, startled. "Who's there?" she called sharply. "The General's orderly." She got up and let him in. "You must leave. The General has information." "What information?" "The Japanese have put price on your head." The orderly fumbled in his tunic pocket, produced a piece of paper and handed it to her. "Those leaflets are being pasted up in the village outside Seijiao. They will appear on the gates of this city tomorrow." She took it over to the lamp to read. $100 reward. $100 reward will be paid by the Japanese army for information leading to the capture alive of the small woman known as Ai Weiwei. The price on my head. Huh? They must be mad. Offering $100 for me. They know you have spied, Ai Weiwei. You must leave by the morning. You must leave as soon as the sun rises. Gladys knew that someone had betrayed her. The enemy would bring her to trial and execute her. Now she had to think of the children. If she was arrested, they would be lost. She had to get them across the mountains to Xi'an. "I leave at once," she said. It took her 2 days to reach the inn. The children were overjoyed to see her. They crowded around in the courtyard, laughing and chattering. Gladys gathered them around her, a sea of brown, smiling, dirty little children who knew her as their real, true, and God-given mother. "Tonight," she said, "I want you all to go to bed early. Tomorrow we're going for a walk across the mountains, a long, long walk. You must get up early and tie your bedding into a roll and take your bowls and chopsticks with you." There was a burst of cheering. A long walk to anywhere was an adventure. Gladys went back along the main street towards the Mandarin's house. He came out to greet her. "Ai Weiwei, it is good to see you," he said gently. "It is good to see you also, but now I have to leave Yangcheng." He listened gravely as she told him of her decision to try to reach Xi'an across the mountains with the children. She could see that he was very perturbed. "I have heard that the Japanese armies hold the mountain passes and have reached the Yellow River. You will have to cross their territory. It will be very dangerous." "We shall stay away from all the known trails." "With 100 children?" "Yes, with 100 children. I dare not leave one behind." "That is true," he said sadly. "You have money, food for the journey?" "No, but as I've said to you many times, God will provide." "On this occasion at least, let me act as his agent. I can provide you with 2 pans of millet and 2 men to carry them for the first part of your journey. It will take you several weeks to reach Xi'an by the route you will have to travel. You understand that?" "Yes. I'm leaving at dawn tomorrow morning." "May God help you," he said. "May the good fortune you deserve be yours." At sun-up, the young children were up and shouting, running around the courtyard, throwing their bundles of bedding at each other, playing tag, and generally behaving in the normal way of young children all over the world. With the aid of her child Ninepence, Gladys tried to sort them out. She tried to tell them that they must save their energy for the long day ahead. She might just as well have told a stream to stop running. The 2 coolies from the Mandarin, carrying the baskets of millet, arrived at the front gate. After one last look round at the bombed-out inn, they were on their way. They followed the main trail south for several miles. Gladys had a whistle, and she blew it once to call the more adventurous little boys down from outcrops of rock, and twice to line them all up to see that no one was missing. They stopped by a stream to boil millet in the iron pot which Gladys carried. She heaped the steaming grain into the basins as each child came up in turn for its helping. At the end of this serving, there wasn't much left in the pot for her. And that was the way things usually turned out. The children, revived after the meal, began to run around again. She gave up trying to keep them in order, but as the afternoon progressed, these games became fewer and fewer, and soon she had 4 small ones hanging on to her coat, protesting that they were tired. And could they all go back to Yangcheng now? Gladys took it in turns with the older boys to carry them. It was getting dark when they came to a mountain village she knew. Help came from an unexpected quarter. An old Buddhist priest stood on the steps of his temple as this Pied Piper of Yangcheng and her brood straggled past. "Where are you going?" he called to Gladys. "We are refugees on the way to Xi'an." "But what are you going to do with all these children, woman?" "I'm looking for a place for us to sleep tonight." "Then you can stay in the temple. It will be warmer than the mountainside." The children needed no prompting. They crowded around the iron pot when Gladys had finished cooking the millet, and when they had eaten, they curled up on their bedding and went fast asleep. She did not sleep so easily. A small creeping doubt had entered her mind concerning the wisdom of starting this journey with so many small ones. Perhaps she was overestimating her own ability. It was one thing to journey through the mountains alone, quite another to take 100 children with you. The more she thought about the future, the less she liked it. But there was no chance of retreat now. She had to go on. They were far from any village when the next night caught them, and they huddled together in a rocky shelter out of the wind. In the night there was a heavy mist, and the children crept under their wet quilts, and next day they steamed and dried out when the sun rose. "How many days will it take us to reach the Yellow River Highway Day?" asked Ninepence. "The muleteers on the normal track used to take 5 days. We're going right through the mountains. About 12, I'd say." "And we shan't see a single Japanese soldier the whole way?" "Oh, I hope not." In the morning the 2 coolies returned to Yangcheng. They had reached the limit of their province. The next 2 nights were spent in the open. This was new country to Gladys, but she knew they were heading south by the direction of the sun. They were thirsty practically all the time, for the sun was hot and wells were only to be found in the villages. After the heavy, wet mountain mists each morning, they would gather round any drip from the rocks and moisten their tongues. The millet was used up now, and they had no more food. The mountains stretched ahead of them, wild and barren, with few places of habitation. Often when they climbed over virgin rock, the slopes were so steep that they had to form a human chain down the mountainside and pass the younger children down from hand to hand. They cried when they fell down and cried when they got tired. Between them, the older children and Gladys were carrying practically all the bedding now, and often they would give one of the 5 or 6-year-olds a piggyback ride for a short distance. There was rarely any moment when a small hand was not clutching at her jacket. And it was at times like these that Gladys would try and raise their spirits with a song. On the 12th day they came out of the mountains and down the foothills towards the Yellow River. As usual at this time, the small children's voices were a constant background of complaint.
I wait day, my feet hurt. I wait day, I'm hungry. I wait day, will you carry me? I wait day, when shall we stop?
Children! Children, look over there! The town of Wanku, and beyond it, look, the Yellow River. See it shining?
But it is so far away, highway day, and we're so hungry.
In the village of Wanku, they'll give us food, and then we'll arrive at the Yellow River. And when we cross that, we'll all be safe. Now let us sing our song as we march down to the town.
He played one, he played knick-knack on my drum with knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone.
They followed the road which led down from the foothills to the town, which had been badly bombed. The children ran from house to house, their shrill voices echoing in the courtyards. There was no one there. Then 2 boys reported that they had found an old man. Gladys hurried up to him. "Old man, this is Wanku, is it not?" "Yes, this is Wanku. But where are all the people? Why is the city deserted?" "The Japanese are coming, and they've all run away." "But where have they all gone?" "Across the Yellow River, away from the Japanese." "How far is it to the river?" 3 miles. Follow the road to the ferry, but you will not find a boat there. The Japanese are coming. Go back to the mountains, woman. They are the only safe places." "No, no, we are going to Xi'an." She blew her whistle twice, and the children lined up around her. "Come on, children. We are going on. We are going on." They trudged down the dusty path to the river's edge. It was about a mile across, running swift and deep in the center. But there were no boats. Ninepence said quietly, "Where are the boats, highway day?" "Well, they must come across every now and then," she answered. "Well, perhaps we're too late today. We'll spend the night here on the riverbank." She fell eventually into a deep but uneasy slumber. When she awoke next morning, the children were already playing in the shallows. The boys trailed off to look for food in the deserted town. Gladys sat on the bank and watched the sun climbing up the sky. She didn't feel well. If only a boat would come. 3 hours later, the boys came back triumphant. Each bore some small contribution of food, a few pounds of mouldy millet, a few dusty-looking flat hard cakes of dough. It was all boiled in the pot over a fire. There was not enough for Gladys and the older boys, but the younger children were fed. The sun rose high, and still no boat moved on the surface of the river. The boys went off to search for more food along the banks. There were a few scattered houses there. She sat quietly watching the children, half alert for the distant rifle fire that would herald the approach of the enemy. The boys came back with a few more scraps of food, which she hoarded for the next day. That night the children huddled together on the bank of the river and whimpered before they went to sleep.
Highway day, we're hungry. Highway day, when are we going to cross the river? When are we going to cross the river, highway day?
She comforted them as best she could, and one by one they dropped off to sleep. Gladys lay on her back and looked up at the stars. Somehow it was easier at night. They ate the last crumbs of food on the 3rd day at the bank of the Yellow River. On the morning of the 4th day, even the youngest children had caught the mood of despair. It was then that Ninepence said, "Ai Weiwei, do you remember telling us how Moses took the children of Israel to the waters of the Red Sea, and how God commanded the water to open and they crossed in safety?" "Yes, I remember." "Then why does not God open the waters of the Yellow River for us to cross?" She looked wearily at the pretty childish face, the innocent wide eyes. "I'm not Moses, Ninepence," she said. "But God is always God, Ai Weiwei. You have told us so 100 times. If he's God, he can open the river for us." For a moment she did not know what to say. How to tell a hungry child on the banks of an immense and wide-flowing river that miracles were not just for the asking. How to say, perhaps we are not worthy of a miracle. How to say, although I can face a mortal enemy wherever he may beset me, I cannot open these vast waters. I have no power other than the power of my own faith. She said instead, "Let you and I kneel down and pray, Ninepence, and perhaps soon our prayers will be answered." At that moment, the thoughts of the Chinese nationalist officer commanding the patrols scouting on the side of the river were suddenly alerted. He heard a noise, an odd noise, a far-off, high-pitched sound, wavering and uncertain. But wait, this sounded almost like singing, faint and far away, high and monotonous, the piping of many children. Were there children left in the villages on this side of the river? He mounted a slight rise in the bank, crawling carefully to the top. He raised himself to see better. It was an astonishing sight. A great crowd of children were assembled on the bank, all seated in a circle and singing loudly. Some smaller ones were splashing and jumping in the shallows. He motioned his men back with a hand signal. "Wait here," he said. "It may be a trick." The Japanese had driven refugees before them on many other occasions. And who were these children? As he walked along the bank, he could see that they were Chinese children all right. They saw him and raced towards him, shouting with delight. "Ai Weiwei," they screamed. "Here's a soldier! Here's a soldier!" The young officer noticed the small woman sitting on the ground. She was thin, hungry-looking. She got to her feet. With a shock of surprise, he realized that she was a foreigner. "Are you mad?" he said. "Who are you?" "We are refugees trying to reach Xi'an." "This will soon be a battlefield. Don't you realize that?" "All China is a battlefield," she said. "Are you in charge of these children?" "Yes, I'm in charge of them. We're trying to cross the river." "You're a foreigner?" "Yes, I'm a foreigner." Her eyes were exhausted. Plainly she was sick. "I think I can get you a boat. It will need 3 journeys to take you all across, and it is dangerous. If a Japanese plane comes over when you're halfway across, there will be little hope." "Thank you, but we must cross the river." He inserted his fingers in his mouth and whistled loudly 3 times. From across the river came 3 answering whistles. 2 figures far away on the other bank pushed a boat into the water and began to row it across. "I cannot thank you enough," she said. "I thought it was the end of us when we couldn't cross the river." With shouts of glee, the children filled the boat. The soldiers ferried them rapidly to the other side. They returned, and more of the children piled in. On the third journey, the soldier helped the foreign woman into the boat with the last group of children. As the boat moved away from the bank, the officer called his men to attention and gravely saluted. He called, "Good luck, foreigner." They found a village 2 or 3 miles back from the bank of the Yellow River. The people were kind to them. Many hundreds of refugees had passed through, but they still found food to spare for the children. Gladys was told of a refugee train which ran from here towards Xi'an. In the evening she assembled the children. "You all know what a train is, don't you?" she said. There was an excited babble of conversation. No, most of them didn't know what a train was. What was it? They'd never heard of such a thing. Gladys demonstrated with sound effects, and ohs of delighted anticipation greeted her description. "Tomorrow you will line up with clean hands and faces, and anyone with a dirty face or dirty hands will not be allowed on that train." Her speech over, the children clambered into the bedding, chattering eagerly of the wondrous experience that was to befall them next day. They were all up at dawn, eagerly tying their bundles. Gladys blew her whistle, and with a great laugh and cheer they set off. 100 yards from the platform, the railway lines curved out of sight between a jumble of houses. The air was tense with anticipation, and after a few minutes far off, there came the noise of the train. 100 children looked terrified. Those were very strange noises. Such a whistling anger, such a terrifying rumble and hiss. Eyes twitched back to that fatal curve. Was Ai Weiwei quite certain she was right about this train? Even in the distance it sounded like the grandfather of all the dragons in the world. Supposing it gobbled them all up? The noise grew greater, and round the corner it snorted. There was one loud, anguished squeal of utter terror from the children as they fled in every direction. By the time the train was 25 yards away, not a single child remained on the platform. The wooden carriages clattered to a halt, and Gladys tried to find the children. They were retrieved from under boxes and bales, from every conceivable hiding place within 200 yards of the station. As the train jogged slowly into motion, the children began to enjoy their experience. For 4 days they stayed aboard the train as it rattled forward in slow, short stages. Occasionally it stopped for hours, and everyone got off and stretched their legs. At intervals along the line there were refugee camps where they were given food and tea. Gladys dozed a great deal of the time. They had been almost 3 weeks on the road now, soaked by rains and chilled by the winds. She had slept badly and gone without food for days on end. At a small village the train stopped. It went no farther. An important bridge had been blown up. The mountains rose steeply ahead of them. They had to cross those mountains. They begged food in the village, and Gladys looked at the high peaks ahead. They frightened her. She didn't want to go on. She just wanted to stop where she was and rest. But they had to get to Xi'an. At first the trail ran upwards. They were all practically barefooted, and sharp flints cut their feet. A chill little thought settled in her mind. If ever they lost the track, they could wander until they died amid such desolation. All that day they climbed painfully upwards. It was in the afternoon, resting for a moment on a rock, that she stared around at the children. The 8- and 9-year-olds were still ahead, but a party of little ones with mournful faces were gathered round her, almost too dumb to plead to be carried or be given food or drink. It was then that Gladys felt tears flowing down her cheeks. She tried to flick them away, but they only came faster, faster and faster, and soon she was sobbing aloud. Sobbing from sheer weakness and exhaustion, sobbing for all the children, for all China and all the world, so deep was her misery. At that moment, she had no heart to go on any further. She was convinced that they were all finished. They would all die in the mountains. She was convinced that she had brought them all to this plight, that she had betrayed them, and she sobbed because of her guilt. The children sobbed with her, and the little boys coming back down the trail stood open-mouthed, and then they too began to wail. For many minutes the sound of their distress echoed in the valley. When it was over, Gladys wiped her face with her coat sleeve and sniffed. The tears had cleansed her soul. She smiled at Ninepence, who crouched against her. A good cry is always good for you. Now that's enough, all of you. We'll sing, and while we're singing we shall march down the track to that big buttress of rock. So stand up, everybody, and no more crying. Let's see who can sing the loudest, shall we? 1, 2, 3.
This old man, he played one. He played knick-knack on my drum with knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. This old man, he played two. He played knick-knack on my shoe.
Next day they came down through the mountains and onto the plain. They reached a village just before dark. On and on they went, day after day, until they reached one of the holy mountain shrines of China, bombed but still very beautiful. And there, after a few days' wait, they caught another train to Journey's End, Xi'an. They got off, and Gladys said, "Now, as we march through the gates of Xi'an, we shall sing loudly." An old Chinese waiting outside the station lifted his head as she spoke. "Woman, you will never get into Xi'an. The gates are closed. No more refugees are allowed into the city." She did not believe him. She could not believe him. The mute faces of the children were turned up towards her. All these long weeks she had sustained them with the mirage of Xi'an. But it was true. It was terribly, ironically true. Gladys marched by herself along the road to the city. As she got closer, she could see that the walls were high and buttressed. The massive wooden gates were barred and shut. A watcher from the wall above shouted, "Woman, go away! The city is packed with refugees. No one comes into the city. Woman, go away!" She leant her face against the hard surface of the door and wept. So long a journey. And for this. She walked slowly back to rejoin the children, not knowing what to tell them. But they had good news for her instead. Representatives of Madame Chai-kai-shek's organization had discovered them. They confirmed that it was impossible for them to stay in Xi'an. For the time being the city was closed, but arrangements had been made to care for the children at Fufeng, a nearby city. An orphanage and a school were open there. Now she felt very ill. She hardly remembered the journey to Fufeng. They marched in through the gates of the ancient Chinese city. A huge temple housed the orphans. The children were equipped with new clothes and shoes, fed and allotted places to sleep. Gladys was given a little room in the temple, and the children went backwards and forwards through it, coming in all the time to show off their new clothes. It was all rather hazy to her. She didn't know that she was half delirious when she decided she must go and preach. How and where, that didn't matter. She got up, took her Bible, and set off along the road. She didn't know where she was going and what she was doing. In a village some miles away, she stood in the square and decided her sermon would come from St. John. "Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But who shall drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst." The villagers laughed at her, this mad woman, this small one who acted so strangely. She remembers nothing of what happened afterwards. She probably wandered from the village and lost conscience by the roadside. The two peasants who carried her body in their cart to the mission hospital knew that she was a foreign devil. She was dying, and it was only right that she should die with her own people. But Gladys Aylward did not die. With the help of modern drugs and the kindly, persevering doctor, she recovered. She rejoined her children and saw them settled in various orphanages. Her own 5 children she cared for herself. It was 1949 when an American missionary society paid her fare back to England. She stayed there for 5 years, regaining her health. But she yearned all the time to return to China. This was difficult. China was now communist. She settled eventually for Formosa, the island still held by the Chinese nationalists. She didn't know what she was going to do when she arrived, but in her terms, God had already settled that for her. She hadn't been there very long before she found an abandoned baby on her doorstep. She said severely, "Now, God, this is a bit too much. You've really gone too far this time. I'm afraid I've got to inform you, God, that I really can't look after any more little children. God, you can't expect me to start all over again with babies at my age." But God did expect her to start all over again. But then, of course, Gladys lost all her arguments with God. She probably never really expected to win one. So she started another orphanage and soon had another 100 children to care for. Gladys Aylward, who died quietly in her sleep in 1970, was an original and extraordinary woman. She could never see a child hungry, a child neglected, a child dirty, or a child in despair without rushing to take it to her heart. And above all, she lifted our hearts because of her innocence and courage, and because of her passionate belief that through God you can move those mountains that block out a view of the sun.